Evening, Venerable.
Yes,
last speaking. Tara is in retreat, so I'll take the lead tonight. And I'm backed successfully by Christine, who is in the Tara Lounge at the Lojong Center as well.
Hello there. Who's there today? Just
Christine,
one person.
That's Christine.
Hello, Christine. Hello, darling. Happy to see you, sweetheart.
Yes. And we have many people joining.
Hello, Venerable.
Good. Okay.
From everywhere.
Nice.
And welcome to this first module or session of the module of transforming problems. And welcome again to you, Venerable. And I will be chanting the mandala for you as well. So
just again, every time, remember what we're doing. Don't just do it as an empty kind of ritual, it's got great meaning. What it is we're all together. Well, you can think we're offering the mandala, which just means our universe, our world. Of course, here it says it's anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers. I hope your world is like that. And you didn't know it was adorned by Mount Meru, did you? Nor the 4 continents. We knew about the sun and the moon. So anyway, whatever it is, you think of this universe as a Buddha land, maybe beautiful and sublime and divine, all the gorgeous things of the world. And you think of simply offering this to the Buddha as a request for the teaching. That's the meaning. It's a very wonderful meaning. So let's do that together.
Sashi perki yukching meto chamri raingi nirek yan padi sangye shindu mekte uwagi roku nanda shingla jepakshu jetsun lama dang pakyena Kecher kikala, kenche trin tri, dita sampe du yesin mala, sabge chuki chapa, that to so, idam gururatna mantalakami achayami.
Okay, so now we think these two thoughts. The first lines are reminding ourselves of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And the second thought is this altruistic attitude, which is expressed in this module today and the one last time, of bodhichitta, this amazing, outrageous aspiration that we exist only for others, which of course is the more advanced attitude. We think this way, and they think we're going to listen to these teachings to get the techniques that we can use that have been developed over the centuries by all the holy beings to help us exactly do that, achieve this bodhichitta, so we can become a Buddha eventually, then we can be qualified to help others. That's the long-term plan. Sangye chadang toke chognam la janchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chadang toke chognam la janchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penche sangye drupa shog sangye chadang toke chognam la janchu badu dagni kyapsu chi Dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sange drupa shog. So like I said, this is actually, like I said last week, this is actually an extension. This is part of the methods for achieving bodhicitta, because it's such a powerful attitude, and because Lama Zopa Rinpoche uses this as a basis of practice so extensively that it's kind of taken out and used and presented as a second entire module on its own. So again, repeatedly remember, that these teachings, as presented in this Discovering Buddhism modules, just take a variation of this presentation of the Buddha, all the literature, all the teachings of the Buddha from the centuries and centuries of the great practitioners. It's this packaging known in the Tibetan as a lam rim, this gradual path, this course. So when you do a course, you graduate, don't you? So here, this course we're doing is internalizing all the various teachings of the Buddha in an orderly way, according to the level of the disciple, just like any body of knowledge. And then we're graduating as a Buddha. That's the goal. It's like you're studying music, you're going to graduate as, your version of Bach. It might take you 20 years, it might take you 5. Here we're graduating as a Buddha. That's the idea. So I like to use all the time, as you know, there's 2 analogies, and these fit perfectly. There's 2 different ways of framing all these teachings and practices. One is this wonderful analogy that a bird needs two wings, wisdom and compassion. And the other one is this, instead of saying the teachings and practices suitable to the disciple of the least capability, which is what Rinpoche very respectfully refers to the first level of teachings, why not say junior school? Because we kind of get it, Then there's high school, then there's university, and then there's postgraduate. Well, here we're in university. This is the compassion wing. Junior school and high school are the wisdom wing. And that's all the nuts and bolts of Buddha's teachings that you read and hear about in the Four Noble Truths, the teachings that are that enable us to put ourselves together to become this marvelous, content, fulfilled, unneurotic, self-confident person, speaking very simply. That's the work of learning to control your body and speech by abiding by the laws of karma, living in vows and doing purification. Then the next level is you go to the high school, now you're more qualified to go to the root of the problem, which is your delusions and your especially attachment. That's high school. And then we've, got some renunciation in this wisdom wing, and now we're qualified to continue working on our mind. That never ceases. But now it's the first lot's in reference to protecting ourselves from suffering. This compassion wing is the teachings are the work on your mind is in reference to how to help others. We realize we're all in the same boat. This is why I repeatedly say it, that the compassion wing is really more advanced. It's a surprise to us because we just like the idea of compassion. Poor sentient beings suffering. I have compassion for sentient beings. But as we're hearing, as we heard last time, the last module, Buddha's view of compassion is way more radical than we imagine. The way we have compassion, is only for the victims, only for the innocent children and animals and a few other people. In other words, if you're an innocent victim, we're prepared to have compassion for you and then we blame somebody. That's the model we use. But the Buddha's telling us, from his point of view, everybody is suffering, and therefore everybody is the object of our compassion. And that's what we're trying to cultivate with bodhicitta. So we've got to understand the logic of that. It's not just, oh yeah, I'm feeling sorry for everybody, pedophiles as well. It doesn't make any sense to us. There's no logic. So we have to understand the logic. And the logic is what you get in the wisdom wing. When you understand that everybody's mind goes back and back and back since beginningless time and goes forward, 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 when you have the view that everybody is driven by the law of karma, whatever we think and do and say produces our future, and that you realize that every moment that we have a virtuous action and do a virtuous thing produces our future happiness and everybody else's, and then everything and then all the suffering we experience is the fruit of our past negative actions. When we have that view, that understanding, then we see the world radically differently. They say the bodhisattvas and Buddhas have such compassion for us because we don't realize this basic law of cause and effect, which is the view that underpins all of Buddha's teachings, honestly. So we don't understand it for ourselves. We cannot understand it for others. Therefore, we cannot see how we can possibly have compassion for anybody but a few innocent victims, because our logic, our packaging, the samsaric reasoning is not the same as Buddha's. You can decide whose reasoning you prefer. That's up to you, So there's two main themes in all of Buddha's teachings. It's the wisdom and compassion. Wisdom and compassion. This wisdom word sounds very abstract, but when we understand it logically in the first stages of practice, it's very clear. We can see very clearly, can't we, when we're driven by attachment and depression and anxiety and fears and worries and anger and low self-esteem. Think about it. That's what suffering means for the ordinary people, ordinary samsaric beings. When we're caught up in this, we are suffering. But look what happens. When we are caught up in this, one thing is we harm others. I mean, just look at the world, please, very clearly. Why do you think people kill, rape, lie, steal? What drives that is their own attachment, their own anger, their own despair, their own rage, the neuroses, in other words, the delusions are why we suffer, number one, and number two, why we harm others. But the crucial piece is this. A particular function, as we've discussed, of all the delusions, attachment, anger, depression, anxiety, jealousy, one of its key functions is, because they are elaborations, because they are distorted views, because each of these states of mind exaggerates and distorts certain aspects of the person, the event, the object, because these states of mind, one, are disturbing, but two, are distorted and therefore delusional. Therefore, they present the world back to us, as Lama Zopa says, in a mistaken way. Because of that, we are living in la la land. Therefore, we're not in touch with reality. We don't see things as they are. We are seeing our own fantasy projections. So the absence of that is what wisdom means. So as you lessen attachment and lessen anger and less harming others and stop killing and stealing and lying, one result is you get more happy. This is so logical, so simple. But two, you become more wise. You see things more clearly. You see things through the lenses now of wisdom and compassion and virtue and goodness. The world appears completely different for you. And this is the reality of the world, Buddha says. So wisdom is simply get what you get when you remove the rubbish. You also get happiness. That's the bonus. So you really get wisdom when you realize emptiness, of course, when you've understood dependent arising and realize emptiness. So this transforming problems technique, which is the most radical way to quickly get bodhicitta, is rooted in two main things, in both wisdom and compassion. Both wisdom and compassion. What drives it is compassion, but what informs it is wisdom. And that's what we're going to be discussing. So Lama Zopa says we need to learn to like problems like we like ice cream. He always finds these delicious, simple analogies, you know. Sounds cute, we all laugh. Well, what does he mean? He means that when every time attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is 1,000 times a day, which is what we mean by a problem, think about it, do the analysis we did back in high school. Attachment is this emotional hunger, this little junkie in us, totally primordial, that underpins everything we do right now, including our virtue, practically until we realize emptiness. And it's this little junkie in us, and this is not being mean. Everybody's driven by this, the monkeys, the ants, the humans, the dogs. It's this little junkie in us that's like a fragile child that just can't stand problems. Literally, the moment something happens that isn't what my attachment wants, something as tiny as stubbing your toe, breaking your cup while you wash the dishes, your boyfriend not looking at you totally perfectly 24 hours for 1 second, the red light lasting a little bit too long, baby miniature problems. The minute attachment gets that, aversion arises, and then we have a panic attack, depending on how strong the aversion is. This is the analysis of attachment and aversion, which are the two fundamental delusions that drive every being in samsara, which is why we suffer. So a problem, by definition, is getting what your attachment doesn't want. Think about it. It's so logical. It's so kind of evident. We should be embarrassed, you know. You stub your toe, you get upset. It's a mild version of anger. Because attachment only wants nice feelings. Attachment can't cope with unnice feelings. Attachment can't cope with a moment of suffering. Stubbing your toe triggers an unpleasant feeling, which is a moment of suffering. And attachment can't stand it. Attachment is this junkie that only wants everything to be lovely every millisecond. It's a way of saying it. And I think we can recognize it, you know. Of course, the problem is we say, but of course I'm angry. I stubbed my toe. Of course I'm angry. I've got a headache. Of course I'm depressed. My boyfriend left us. We say that because we don't have an analysis. We haven't unpacked it all. We're using Buddha's teachings here to unpack these. The underpinning assumption is we can get rid of these delusions. That's the point. So, if you're trying to be the best tennis player on the planet, and you're at Wimbledon right now, You know how hard you work to get there. And that means you persevere and you persevere for days, weeks, months, and years through the problems. If the moment you start to get a bit puffed on the tennis court, oh, I'm feeling a bit tired, I better stop. You'd never get to Wimbledon. You'd never achieve anything. Now, we know this when it comes to achieving artistic goals and, other goals. We know you've got to make an effort. We know it's got to be hurtful. We know if there's no pain, there's no progress. We know these things, and we persevere incredibly through the pain, through the difficulty, through the obstacles. We really are very good at it. But when it comes to emotional things, we are like infants. This is very fascinating. We can see this very logically because, on the tennis court, having a lot of pain is a problem. But if you just stub your toe, you want to burst into tears. But you don't mind the pain on the tennis court. This is what making effort means. We're going to discuss this in the 6 perfections, but it's good to discuss it here. So it's all a question of your goal, isn't it? If your goal is to become the best tennis player and beat that crazy Australian called Nick Kyrgios, I don't know if you watch the tennis, then you're going to persevere like crazy. You're going to, the problem comes and you're going to greet the problem. Are you not? You're going to be persevering through the pain, persevering through the exhaustion, persevering through the broken muscles and healing as quick as you can to get back on that court. We understand it totally. It is not a surprise to us. When I did Kung Fu, trained 6 days a week, I was exhausted every night I got home, 3 hours of training, but I was in heaven. We really understand this and people honor. People don't criticize the tennis players. How dare they sit out there while they're exhausted with all that pain? They should be locked up in prison. They're victims loving the pain. No, we admire their courage of learning to like problems like they like ice cream. I mean, it's really not a complicated concept. But when it comes to emotional problems, it absolutely is unbelievable. It's impossible for us. We're like less than infants. This is what's fascinating. If we compare these two experiences, we'll understand the point. So, okay, the question is, then what's the goal? I mean, I want to win Wimbledon. Yes, there's a reason I'm going to persevere. So what's your reason here? And this is where it gets complicated. This is where it gets difficult for us. This is where it gets too abstract. The reason you persevere through the problems on the tennis court is because you want to perfect your backhand and perfect your forehand and get incredible stamina so you won't get exhausted playing Nadal for 3 hours, in the middle of July in the summer in England. Thank God it's not very hot summer. Because you need to perseverance, you need stamina, and you need to perfect your different shots. That's why you persevere, because you want to win Wimbledon. We get that. So what is it what are we going to win here? What are we going to win here? Our own Buddhahood. Now, this is where it sounds holy. You're not going to win a prize. Someone's not going to pat you on the back and give you a medal and $1 million. What drives the bodhisattvas or the aspiring bodhisattvas to be glad when problems come, the logic is super clear. It is super clear. And this is what's hard to imagine. This bodhicitta, this intense compassion for suffering sentient beings, or actually if it is bodhicitta, is so powerful in these holy beings, and all we can do is aspire to this, that all they want, what's in their mind, if you can try and conceive of this, is this unbelievable compassion for sentient beings. You've got to try and understand that. I mean, it's hard for us. The only compassion we can comprehend is what we can imagine, which is limited by our neuroses and delusions and self-centeredness. I mean, we can have compassion, but excuse me, your baby's crying for 1 hour, you're prepared to have compassion. All night, no wonder mothers kill their babies, So we've got limited compassion. So it's hard for us to imagine the level of compassion of the holy beings, Not even Buddhas yet. That's hard to imagine, but hear the words, please. So what drives the bodhisattvas or the aspiring bodhisattvas to happily greet a problem is because every time, what a problem by definition is, like we said, but what a problem is by definition is what attachment doesn't want. That means aversion arises. So there's attachment and aversion. These are the primordial two states that underpin all the others, attachment and aversion. So that attachment and that aversion and the other delusions are what are preventing these bodhisattvas becoming a Buddha. That pain in the knee and that puffing and panting is what's preventing that tennis player from becoming the best tennis player to beat Nadal. So they persevere and persevere and persevere until eventually it's not a problem at all. They love their problems because it helps them become the best tennis player on the planet. So because delusions are holding us back from being able to benefit sentient beings perfectly, then the bodhisattvas want every opportunity to smash the delusions. They want to smash the delusions. So what causes you to smash a delusion? When does a delusion arise? When your attachment doesn't get what it wants. So you're happy when attachment doesn't get what it wants, because now by greeting it, you put an atomic bomb under attachment and you lessen attachment. And all of this is the work that's also loosening the grip of ego grasping and prepares us easily, which will be our next modules coming up, where we can really easily realize emptiness and cut the root completely of all delusions. And then combining that with bodhicitta, you become this outrageous Buddha. So the logic of it is very precise. A problem is when your delusions, when your attachment doesn't get what it wants. That's what by definition a problem is. So you want to greet a problem because that attacks the attachment. Every time you persevere on the tennis court, your muscles get stronger. Every time you persevere on the tennis court, your stamina gets stronger. Your shots get better. That's why you want the problem. The problem is when you force yourself through the problem and then you greet it and go further. That's what we're trying to do here. That's what bodhisattvas are trying to do. So what we're trying to do here is already so it's putting atomic bombs. Every time you get a problem, stub your toe and you grab your mind and you greet it. I'm glad I had to stub my toe. Attachment just didn't get what it wanted, but now I understand. You grab it quickly, the aversion arises, and by greeting it, you smash both attachment and aversion. You put atomic bombs under attachment and aversion right there. So the subtler meaning of this, the wisdom component of this, is that nothing has an intrinsic nature. Nothing has an intrinsic nature. This is emptiness. We're not dealing with that right at the beginning. It's too simple. It's too complicated. Here, we're more qualified. So when we already know that a problem is how we label it, then already that enables us even more to greet it, because we realize it's how we label it. So both compassion and wisdom, compassion is the energy that compels us to want to greet a problem, but it's the ability to understand, depending on arising on emptiness, even to some degree, that enables us very quickly to shift it, you know. This is what underpins this practice. That's why I always quote my friends in prison. That's Sunny. I'm never always quoting Sunny, always quoting Sunny. So outrageous. Not even a Buddhist, had no interest in Buddhism, still doesn't have. She's sitting in Ireland now, I just talked to her recently. She has no interest in Buddhism. She doesn't talk about it. She just got this amazing capacity to have this incredible emotional intelligence that enabled her in the midst of this nightmare of being on death row, totally innocent, husband executed, his head burst into flames on the execution place, lost her children, lost her parents, in isolation for years. Finally, I realized I could not change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided I am not a prisoner. I am a monk. I am not in a cell. I am in a cave. That's the essence of transforming problems, straight out of the mouth of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Like she hit it on the head, and it was in her already. She must have done it in the past life. She certainly didn't learn it in this life. She had the intelligence to see. She didn't, and this is an interesting point. Okay, she didn't do it so much then driven by bodhicitta. It wasn't like I must perfect myself so I can help others. She could see logically, which is the wisdom component, that her being raging and angry and despairing and screaming and bashing her head against a brick wall in this nightmarish environment wouldn't have helped her. That's the intelligence that has to come with this one first. You're not being a martyr. She knew she didn't want to go crazy. It was for her sake. How intelligent. So this is what's behind this concept of transforming problems into happiness. But as Bobonka Rinpoche says, you know, you need to be a suitable vessel to be able to practice this approach. Of course you should. And a suitable vessel means a person who's done the wisdom wing. Listen, if you're still an ordinary person, like all of us, we've done a little bit of practice now, we can understand this stuff a little bit. But like if you haven't done any practice, like the majority of the human beings on this planet, with great respect to us, as Lama Zopa says, the vast majority of all humans on this planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives. As shocking as that sounds, that's what Buddha means by being in samsara, giving all the power to the outside, totally unconscious of what the hell is going on in here. When we start to become conscious, and I'm not talking about being Buddhist only, I'm talking about anybody who's a good human being. When we start to become conscious, then we start to change. But most of us aren't unconscious. So what is it? We wake up in this life with lots of attachment and feeling I'm nothing and nobody, so I want a partner, I find a partner, then we love each other, how wonderful, and then start to get fighting and angry and victim, and I get beaten up and abused and all the rubbish. So if I'm a victim still, and victim is a great word for being an unconscious human being, like join the universe people. I didn't ask to get born. It's not my fault. Why is this happening to me? Paralysis, you know. So that's an unsuitable vessel for these teachings. I mean, I always joke, and I want to use these 8 verses as the basis of our teachings for these weeks. It's in the part 2, the 8 verses of thought transformation on page 118, chapter 9. It's a simple little commentary by His Holiness, and this is the most classic. I mean, I don't know about the other one. I'm not so familiar with this other thing. Ever-flowing nectar of Mahayana thought training, annihilating the demon of the self-cherishing mind. That sounds like a text Lama Zopa would use, and I don't think I've even read it. These 2 different, yeah. So there's a lovely practice in here. There's a Chenrezig practice. We might do that too. We'll do this as a meditation. Chapter 8, see? It's a lovely practice of Chenrezig, 1,000-arm Chenrezig, combined with doing these 8 verses. So we'll use this as our basis in this 4 weeks we're doing here. But the 8 verses are what we have to become familiar with, you know. We're going to use that as our basis. So this is page 118, so we can turn, that's in your, if you've got your tablet version, your phone version, something else. Okay, the 8 verses. Okay, so you have to be a suitable vessel, meaning you've got to have understood your mind. You've got to be somebody coming to be conscious. You've got to understand karma. You've got to know the causes of suffering. You've got to know about the delusions. You've got to know the nuts and bolts of the wisdom wing. That's it. That's the suitable vessel. Just like saying, if you can't go straight to, you know, university level physics, you're not a suitable vessel. You've got to do junior school and high school first. It's pretty obvious. Suitable vessel sounds very grand. Just means you're not qualified, honey. Because, you know, as I joke in verse 2 here, and we'll go into all this, I joke and say, if you as a therapist gave this piece of advice to your client, you could be sued for abuse. I promise. In fact, all these verses. You could sue your therapist for abuse if she suggests these practices to you, if you're not a suitable vessel, and you will see what I mean when we go into them. So again, the basis here, the basis is that you've got this view of karma, that your consciousness did not begin in your mother's womb. It is not your brain. It did not come from mummy and daddy. It did not come from a creator. It did not come from nothing. It's a beginningless continuity of mental moments that tracks itself back and back and back and back and back. Number 1. Number 2, these teachings are based on the assumption that the law of karma runs your mind, that every millisecond of what you think and do and say just naturally, as they say, sows seeds in your mind, but as I like to say, programs your mind. So those seeds will ripen, that they will ripen just naturally in the future as the person you become. This is the logic of karma. As His Holiness says, we are our own creators. I mean, this is a shocking concept. And if we don't even understand this view psychologically, intellectually, theoretically, these teachings are the methods of a mentally ill person. Truly. They might make sense if you're a Christian with devotion in God. There's a closer link there, doing God's will. God is in everybody, forgiving, all that. But there's no logic in the materialist philosophical view of the world. There is no logic whatsoever for these instructions, you know, none. They're like madness. When this text was written by Langri Tangpa, this Tibetan fellow, holy being, who was a student of a disciple of Drom Tompa, who was the main disciple of Atisha in the 11th, 12th century, who first came from India and came to Tibet and spent the last 15, 17 years of his life there. And Atisha brought all this lineage of practices from his great guru Sulingpa in Sumatra, one of those islands near Java in Indonesia. You go there now and you see, you know, not Sumatra, sorry, Java. I've been to Java where they got that, not Java, yeah, Java. And you know, it's now a Muslim country mostly, but it was Vajrayana flourishing in the, you know, those early centuries, flourishing there. Still many, many monasteries and temples left there, you know. And Atisha was there when he left India, drove and took a boat, no doubt, and went south and spent years and years with Sentient, one of his main gurus. And it's where he got the lineage of all these teachings. And he brought these to Tibet, and he is the source. He's the source of these teachings on transforming problems. This radical approach of accomplishing bodhichitta called exchanging self for others. So the basis is understanding karma. Then the next basis in high school is understanding the way this mind works. The crucial piece in there, which is unique to the Buddhist psychological model, is that you've got the delusions, the virtues, the delusions and virtues, these absolutely separate sets of states of mind. We don't use this at all in our modern psychological models. We give equal status to attachment, anger, jealousy, love, kindness, compassion, as if a normal person has a little bit of all of them. There's no view in neuroscience or modern psychology that would even suggest that you could rid the mind utterly of all the delusions. But this is the total view that underpins all of these teachings we're discussing here. Buddha has found from his own direct experience that all these delusions are not at the core of our being and thus can be removed. This is the view that is the view of Buddhism. That's what Nirvana means. Not some fancy place like heaven. You've achieved your nirvana, your cessation of suffering and its causes, when you have cut the root by realizing emptiness and cut the root of all the delusions. This is hard to understand intellectually if we don't understand the intellectual presentation of this model of the mind, which we study in middle school, you know, in high school. It's a bizarre idea, you know. So this is what these teachings are based on. The view that you can get rid of the delusions, because the view that you can perfect your tennis to the point where you can beat Federer or beat Nadal and win Wimbledon. The view that you can become a Buddha who has only then got the wisdom that sees the minds of all beings throughout the universe, could only see their karma perfectly and know exactly how to benefit everyone, but has the compassion to want to benefit and the power to do so. That's Buddha. That's the goal. That's where we're heading. And these teachings on karma and the mind underpin all of these teachings. If you don't understand that lot, these teachings make no sense whatsoever. They're the instructions of a mentally ill person. Okay? So before we start using the text as our basis, are there any questions, please, about the principles, the concept, the approach? We're going to go into the details, I promise you. But are there any questions?
Please raise your hand, the virtual hand, or write the question in the chat.
Mm-hmm. So this is why if we're not a suitable vessel, you got to judge. Can I do, like if you're on the court and, you know, and you're trying to play with Federer, even in just a kind of a warm-up match, if you can't take the shots he gives you, you walk off that court. You're not capable. You're not a suitable vessel. So when you hear these instructions, and you know, like in your present life, you've got a lot of suffering, you've been abused, let's say, and you're unable to deal with these, you're unable to even hear these instructions, then please put them on the back burner, okay? Yes, Lorraine.
Thank you, Venerable. So
Yes,
I have
darling.
a question about I have been very ill. It looks like I've needed several surgeries.
No, darling, I want to cut. Forgive me, sweetheart. I want to hear what you have to say, but I wonder if you could I want to know if you want to clarify any terminology, because then I'm going to go into these techniques, and already I can hear it. If you're going to have some suffering coming up, these are the techniques for you to deal with that suffering. So if that's the general point of the question, is it? But it's just the general approach. Do you understand the approach we're describing?
I hope so. I'm just hoping that, you know, with the mental state that I'm in while I'm going through the physical issues, if this is something, because I really think that it would be very beneficial for me to do these things to help with the suffering.
Sure. But you have to know, though, but you have to know if you're mentally capable. You have to, that's my point, Lorraine, the point I've just made. Whenever any problem comes and we know we're forced to have that problem, like have some surgery or something, or have some physical pain, we do our best. We can try to apply these techniques, but if we're really not capable, we must not force ourselves and go crazy. So I think it's really, you know, this is the whole attitude. So if you do understand the general approach, then that's good enough for now. Let's look into the details of it. And then we can see, then maybe from this, there might be questions. Is that okay, Lorraine?
Yes, thank you.
Good, darling. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Any other questions? Just about clarifying this level of practice. If it makes sense, it's advanced. Yeah, people? Okay, good. So let's start with the first verse. And I swear to you, we might not get past that before the end of the class, because it needs, again, a lot of referencing, a lot of explaining. Okay. Determined to accomplish. Oh, this is rubbish. This is a wrong translation. I'm not interested. I don't want this translation. This is no good. This is somebody's just twisted it and made it all cute. I'll try and say it the way it's usually translated, which is the more accurate terms, which explains it very deeply. What have you got here? No, this is no good either. This is wrong too. This is rubbish. Sorry. Any other versions available? I mean, people just don't like the words, so they change them. It's so wicked. That's what Lama Zopa says people do. It's just so wicked. We don't like it, so we change it. It's just wicked. It completely takes the meaning away. Let me see if I've got a version somewhere here. I think I have. So wicked what people are doing. So naughty. Here it is. I've got a version of this 1000 Chen Raisik and the 8 verses. Let's see if that version, what happened here? I just tried to open it myself and then the whole screen got big. Now I'm confused. Wait a minute. Here it is. So let me see what this version is like. Now we're there. This is the one. So can you show me, let's look into the, let's have a look at the, this other text. The one where I just was, course notes. Let's see what version of this 1000 Chen Raisik they've got in here. So let's see what chapter it is. Hang on a minute. It might be the right one. Yeah, this is the one. This is it. This is in the text or what? Who put that up there?
I put it up. It's from the PMT website.
Okay, well, let's just look first. Before you put it up, take it down. Let's look at the text itself. And please go to the, put the course notes up. Now you've got your own course notes. Don't worry. You've got your own course notes. So then you go to your course notes. Let's look at this particular and see what text it is. This is so naughty what people do. Oh, I can't believe it. Even with His Holiness's teachings, this is very wicked. Okay, it's the one in chapter 8. Let's look at that, 104. Let's see if this is the version, the correct one. Because the words are so precise, I tell you. Yeah, this is correct. The one in, that's a different version. The one with His Holiness's teachings is a wrong translation with respect, and this is the correct one. So let's take this one as our basis, please. This one in this lovely practice. We don't need it on the don't need it on the screen. I'd rather see the people. So have your own text open if you want to, or just listen. Okay, this is correct. This is the one that's correct. It's got great meaning, these words. Now we'll explain. So this first verse says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit, and this is not a mistake, from all sentient beings who are more precious to me than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will hold them most dear at all times. Now, this needs huge explanation again, okay? So first of all, what in the name of goodness does it mean determined, I am determined to get the greatest possible benefit from sentient beings. It sounds like you're going to be misusing them. It sounds you want to abuse them and misuse them, doesn't it? But you've got to understand this meaning here. This drives the whole series of verses. So this is where we don't talk like this. You've got to. So let's use another analogy. Let's say you want to become the best doctor, one of the best surgeon. Let's say the best surgeon on the planet. You want to become the best surgeon. But the assumption, of course, is that you're driven by compassion, not because you want the salary. So take this as the view. And you want to become the best surgeon. Now, this is very logical. Think about it. What would be what do you need most to be able to benefit sentient beings? What do you need most if you want to be a best surgeon? You obviously need to meet people with broken limbs, isn't it? You don't want to just put your little sign up on your door and dispense a few band-aids from 9 to 5 and then close your door and saying you're being a nice doctor. No, you want to go join the Doctors Sans Frontières, don't you? And you want to go into those tents in the war zones where the people with smashed limbs are needing your help desperately. That's what a bodhisattva is. So then, in order for this person saying this one, determined to make the most of all these suffering people, in the war zones with their broken limbs and their smashed arms and their smashed skulls. In other words, the more people with broken limbs that I meet, this is all sentient beings, because we're all suffering with our broken minds. So you want to make the most, you want to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all these suffering beings, because they are the grist for your mill. Without these suffering beings with their smashed limbs, how can you become the best surgeon? It is impossible. You need to meet every damn person with smashed limbs. The quickest way to go, you want to do that. So in other words, you want to make the greatest benefit. You want to get the benefit from all these suffering beings who are more, now this is the next one that's insane. Think of these words, all sentient beings on this planet, the pedophiles, the animals, the spirits, the humans, the gods, the hell beings, billions upon trillions upon billions upon trillions of sentient beings. Think about this. What happened? My page just went. Wrong one. There it is. Think about this. All these billions of sentient beings, they are more precious to you than just a million. Just let's put a million euros. This is a mentally ill statement, right? What the hell is this man talking about? Why in the name of heaven should all the sentient beings on this planet be more precious to me than $1 million? I mean, a wish-fulfilling jewel does not exist anymore. Apparently it used to exist eons ago. It's like $1 million. It's just like $20 billion. So just keep it $1 million. Maybe you might say your baby, your beloved, your best boyfriend on the planet. Maybe you'd say, if you had the choice between them and $1 million, you just might choose them. Think about it. Think about this. So what the name of God is this person talking about? That all sentient beings on the planet, enemies, friends, and strangers, psychopaths and murderers, and those who've harmed you, especially your ex-husband who has abused you, especially, as Geshe Sopa says, bodhisattvas need their enemies. They're the best object in the planet. That all of these sentient beings are more precious to you than $1 million. So this is clearly an advanced thought. Clearly, these verses are written by a person who's got this view. Clearly, Mr. Langri Tangpa has this view in his mind, you know. I mean, think about it. It's like insane. So all we're trying to do here is imagine this and attempt to aspire to it one day. So all these sentient beings who are totally suffering with their smashed heads and smashed arms and smashed legs, the only way for you to become a Buddha as quickly as possible, the only way for you to become the best surgeon possible is to meet every damn one of them and treat them. And that's how you will become the best, you'll become a Buddha. So every one of these sentient beings is so precious to you because they're the grist for your mill. They enable you to become a Buddha. Without these suffering beings, you can't lift a finger. So it's dependent arising and it's compassion, but it's such a curious way to frame it. We've got to understand it, you know. Determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit, to make the most out of all these unbearably suffering sentient beings throughout the universe, who are more precious to me than $20 billion, than $1 billion, than $100. So what am I going to do? This is the general statement. I'm going to hold every single one of them in my heart as most dear at all times. Now, clearly, this is a so advanced practice, it's insane. So please hear it appropriately, you know. This is clearly a person who can write these words from the heart has clearly realized this. So all we can do with it is what? Hear the logic of it and aspire and say the words from our heart and know and aspire to be like this ourselves. That's the best we can do with it, you know. You understand the reasoning for it, the logic behind it. So are there any questions about just this verse, please? Is it clear what I'm saying? Is it logical what I'm saying? And if it's not, I really, really, really want you to tell me, because I want you to understand this just theoretically, properly first. Otherwise, the rest of the verses have no meaning. Are there any questions about this verse, the meaning of it, the logic of the words of it? Yes, darling girl. Yes, Miriam, talk to me.
Hi, Venerable. It is clear to me. Now, I'm not a surgeon, so I'm not a tennis player. I'm not a surgeon. I'm like an everyday average person. So I greet my everyday problems with the same approach, basically, right? I mean,
Okay.
as a goal, with the goal to become a bodhisattva, correct?
No, say it more, Miriam.
So the example with the surgeon is clear. He needs the broken bones, the smashed heads, the war zones, and so on and so forth. But I'm not a surgeon, so
no, but you're trying to become a Buddha, aren't you? But the goal,
exactly.
the analogies, so if you're trying to become a Buddha, then as if you were becoming the best surgeon, given that you want to become a Buddha, which means you want to smash your delusions as quickly as possible. And the quickest way to smash your delusions is to meet is to have this incredible love and caring for all sentient beings, because without them and without their suffering and without the wackos and the pedophiles upsetting your mind, you won't be able to become a Buddha. That's the attitude, that's you. So they're all precious to you because you're relying upon them, and your compassion for them and your love for them is the very basis of your becoming a Buddha. In other words, you can't become a surgeon if you don't meet suffering people, and you cannot become a Buddha if you don't meet suffering sentient beings, especially, which these verses are going to express, especially the ones who harm you. This is the root of what we're getting to, especially the ones who harm you. Do you understand? That's the thinking behind it. Makes sense? Good.
Yeah, totally. So it's on a small scale, basically.
That's it. I mean, it's just analogies, but well, we can only do it according to our capacity. Small scale, no, it's not small scale. Becoming a Buddha is the most vast thing you'd ever become. So whether a tiny little person not qualified yet, or whether we're, you know, it's the same approach.
And then small scale in the sense that I take the problems that my everyday problems,
that's exactly right.
Everyday encounters. That's what I meant on a small scale, because I'm not a surgeon. So today I had a situation, it was exactly this, and I saw that there was pain on the other side, and I saw that, you know, whatever. And so I work with what's given to me, and I
Exactly.
Yeah,
and this is the other point. This is also the point, Miriam. You don't wait until you're, you know, got cancer. You don't wait till your husband leaves you. You don't wait till you break your leg. You don't wait till you're accused of murder before you start to transform problems. You work on it when you stub your toe. You work on it when a person barges in the line at the airport. You work on it when the mean person in the shop doesn't look nice at you. You understand? That's the general. Exactly. Yeah. Yes, Judy. Good, darling. Thank you. Yes, Judy.
Thank you.
Venerable, the question is it okay to no, I understand the verse, by the way, the words make sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good then.
So the question is it okay to know this aspect of compassion just in theory and focus on the wisdom path?
No, darling,
So-
this is not the issue. This is not the discussion here. That's not the point here. No, okay, put it this way. If you're saying this is too much for me, then yes,
Yeah.
put it on the back burner. But if you're a brave girl, you can hear it. It's sort of like you're in grade 3 of math, but you go to a class about physics. You know you're not ready, but you look forward to it.
Yeah.
Do you understand me?
Yes.
In reality,
Yeah, no, I know.
in actual application in day-to-day life, you apply the tools that you can, but there's no harm in listening to these tools, because then you aspire one day I'll be able to do it.
Okay. Yes.
You understand?
Yes, I do understand that.
Good,
That makes
good.
sense.
Good, Julie.
I'm not saying it from a scared perspective or like concerned perspective, but you have said so many times that it takes lifetimes to just get the wisdom wing down.
I know,
You know
but
what
you
I mean?
can't do the wisdom wing on its own. It's not enough. You need
Okay.
the compassion wing gives the wisdom wing juice.
Got
You
it.
get the point?
Yes, and it
Okay.
relates to what you were telling Lorraine, like do a little bit every day,
Exactly. That's right. Exactly.
given your scope. Okay, yeah, got it.
Good,
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Mm.
Yes, Mark.
Hello, Venerable Ravina.
Yes.
Thank you for the teaching. A question about the wording in the first verse, because I've
Yeah.
studied this a couple of times.
Yeah.
And in the translation that we're looking at, it says, determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient
That's
beings.
right. Yes.
And in the previous three times I've studied it, it's with a determination to achieve the highest aim for the benefit of all
I know it's a
sentient.
mistaken translation. I'm suggesting.
Is it? Okay.
Definitely. This has got a very specific meaning in Buddhism, a really unique, precise meaning. So it's not the point in this context for. It is wrong. And that's why the earlier translation for His Holiness's commentary that the English translator did is completely not even the point. Because this is why it's hard to understand it. I'm trying to explain it. It's hard to understand it. It's weird. We don't talk this way. In other words, if you're trying to become a doctor, you do not say determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all these sick people. It sounds weird.
Right.
It sounds like you're abusing them. It means without them, how can you become a surgeon? So you're going to make the most of these precious beings who without whom you cannot become a surgeon. That's the point.
I understand, but that other translation is all over the place.
I know it is. And this is why Lama Zopa in a commentary and in a particular thing I'm editing at the moment, Rinpoche says it so sadly that we just translate wrongly. So the meaning is lost. This is such a specific meaning, such a specific meaning, you know.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Fascinating point. Because the other thing is, you see, all the time when we talk about, when we do the 4 opponent powers, the first step is reliance. The second step the first step is regret. But the second one is called reliance, and it's very curious. There are 2 parts. The first part's easy to understand, is refuge. You rely upon the Buddha. But the second one says it literally. The second part is where you have compassion, but they call that relying upon sentient beings. It's got the same meaning as this. Without you depending upon sick people, that's really the word, depending upon. It's a dependent arising. Without you meeting sick people, broken leg people, how can you become a surgeon? So if you don't meet suffering sentient beings, how can you become a Buddha? You hear me? That's the meaning.
Yes, I do.
That's why the wisdom wing, you go to the mountains, you come down to the bodhisattva wing and you meet the suffering beings. And they are the grist for your mill. It's upon whom you rely utterly upon them. And that's why Geshe Sopa said, the real ones that the bodhisattvas need, rely upon, depend upon, are their enemies. They're the best ones to smash ego grasping, the quickest one to get bodhicitta. You understand the meaning? That's the meaning implied by this.
Okay, thank you.
So much, Mark. It's a very important point. It's such a good point, I tell you. I mean, I don't speak Tibetan, but there's something, because I have to edit. You've got to be really accurate, you know. And the meaning is, and because it's such a way that we don't talk like this, it's quite cultural, but it's crucial to understand the meaning behind it. Then we can reframe it in the ways we have, as long as we understand the meaning. Otherwise, we lose the meaning completely. Right. Thank you, Mark. So important.
Thank you.
Yes, Terry. Yes, sweetheart.
Hello. If you are studying to become like the master in, let's say, fixing broken legs, and you have 20 people who you're, testing your skills or studying, like being in a school, and you messed up all the people's feet, and then 21st person you manage to get the feet together. Is that any more?
What's the word you're saying? Feet? What?
Like the 21st person you manage to, heal or cure or, make.
Oh, okay. So what's the question?
Feet. Is that like any good if you destroy 20 people's leg and then one you don't?
No, that's that's not the goal, is it? No, clearly you need wisdom. I mean, having this compassion and the wish to heal somebody, that's why if you're not qualified, if you haven't done, this is a good analogy, if you haven't done the wisdom wing, which in this analogy means become a surgeon, gone to university, and for you to walk into the tent in the war zone and start trying to heal people's broken legs, this is very rude of you. No, you're not qualified. So you mind your own business. You do not touch their legs until you have the wisdom to know how. That's why Pabonka says you've got to be a suitable vessel. So we have to do only what we're capable of. Do you understand my point? It's a good question.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now any more questions? This is so important, these words, because this is this is 8th century, people. This is 8th century, We don't talk like this. Hello. Yes, Ariella.
Good evening, Venerable. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm afraid to ask my question. To feel compassion towards our enemies, does it necessarily mean that we need to feel love towards them?
Sweetheart, this is all the techniques we're about to describe in these verses that are coming. So I think we'll go into that. We'll go into that. We'll explain what each of these verses is describing, a very specific attitude to try and cultivate. So, honey child, like anything, when you first practice the piano piece, you don't feel that music because you're still not clear with all the technology and the theory. It's a real struggle to do it properly, isn't it? So you can't possibly feel it yet, but you've got to start with the theory. Are you seeing my point? Are you understanding my point, Ariella?
Yes.
You've got to start somewhere with the right concept. You can't just put your hands on the piano. You need the wisdom of the theory. Then you practice and practice. And eventually when you've got it down, then you start to feel it. Compassion and love are the same. You start at the bare bones first, and then you practice, practice, practice. And then enormous feeling eventually comes. You can't force that.
So if I understand you correctly, I'm speaking specifically about enemies. If we slowly start generating and feeling compassion towards them, eventually the love will come. Not necessarily love, I love you, hug you, and marry you again.
No, love and compassion. Love is the wish that someone be happy, and compassion is the wish they don't suffer. They come very much hand in hand. So the thing is, though, tell me from what you've understood, out of interest, what will be the basis of your having compassion for the person who harms you? We're going to go into that, but just out of interest, tell me your view, Ariella, what you've been hearing from the Buddha's teachings. What is the basis of your developing love and compassion for a person who harms you? What do you understand?
Can you ask again the question? I'm sorry. Again.
You said you try and cultivate compassion for an enemy. Why would you want to why would you have compassion for an enemy? What's the reason for it? Why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? Okay, so fine, you don't know. It's a good point, isn't it? So we're going to get into that now with these verses, darling. We're going to show the logic of why we can have love and compassion for enemies. In fact, bodhisattvas have more compassion for the bad.
I didn't want to say to reach enlightenment. I didn't want to say something. I wanted to say something that at the moment it's inside of me, and I'm not there yet. I guess that's why I'm here.
I know, but this is why it's important to have the words. So I'll give you the answer now. When, first of all, in the wisdom wing, when you understand from the Buddha's teachings on the Four Noble Truths that the reason you suffer is because of your past negative karma and your delusions. That's Buddha's technical answer. So when we slowly in the wisdom wing start to understand that first theoretically and gradually apply it in our daily lives, that's the basis of then when you look outside and forget about the enemy that harms you, even just when you see the guy who kicks the dog. The instinct we have now, isn't it, is to have compassion for the dog and then to get angry with the guy. That's the samsaric view. But when we have the view of karma, and this takes time to practice, Ariella, then you'll suddenly realize that that dog and that guy have a very strong karmic connection from many past lives, and that that dog has harmed that guy in a past life. And what drives that guy is this anger to harm the dog. So then you'll have compassion for the dog because you know the dog caused its own suffering from 22 lives ago, but you'll have even more compassion for the guy because the dog is just finishing its karma, but the guy is just beginning a whole series of more future sufferings. It's a bit like a mother for her junkie kid. Everybody else hates the junkie kid. He's mean, he steals, he lies, he vomits in the soup, but you're his mum. And you can, and this is my point now, you have incredible compassion for your son because you see he's harming himself. Do you get that? So Buddha's telling us that we all are the cause of our own suffering, but also we are the cause of our own happiness. So being the cause of our own suffering is the basis of why you'd try to have compassion for an enemy. That's the logic behind it. Can you hear that, Ariella? Which is based on karma. So if we don't have the view of karma, there's no logic here. Do you understand? So it takes time, sweetheart.
Yes.
It takes time, Ariella. We can't pretend, we can't force.
Of course.
It's not just a gooey feeling to get. It's a logic behind it. Do you understand?
Practice, practice.
Thank
yes.
you, darling.
Thank you.
Exactly right. Thank you, darling.
Thank you.
Okay. So good. Good. So I'll say the verse one more time. Determined, and I'll say it in different words. I am determined to make the most of all these suffering beings because I want to become a Buddha as quickly as possible. I want to become a Buddha as quickly as possible. So the grist for my mill, the way to help me become a Buddha as quickly as possible is to meet crazy suffering sentient beings because they attack my delusions. And each of the verses after expresses exactly this. So I want these suffering sentient beings. I want to meet them. I want to meet the enemies. I want to have the problems because that's the opportunity I've got to smash my delusions and become a Buddha. Then I can be of benefit. I mean, of course, it's hard. It's a high view to have. It's an intense view to have. It's intense, you know. These teachings, these verses were kept secret. They're like, talk about Tantra being secret. These verses, this teaching from Atisha was kept secret. Eventually when Langri Champa wrote this, it began to become public. So they're outrageous attitude. There's an outrageous view, you know. I mean, Milarepa said even the normal Dharma teachings, whatever the world is, Dharma is opposite. I mean, this is totally opposite to the deepest instincts of ordinary samsaric sentient beings. We need to be a suitable vessel. So the second verse. This is what you can get, but you can be accused of abusing your client, okay? When in the company of others, and let's face it, it's pretty common, maybe besides the pandemic, we live our lives in relation to others. We live our lives in relation to sentient beings. So when in the company of others, these words are too heavy for our mind. We have to translate them. It's too heavy for us. We don't talk like this. When in the company of others, I will always consider myself to be the lowest of all. And from the depths of my heart, hold others dear, and wait for it, and supreme. I mean, this is really, really, really hard to hear. Because why? Because look at the way we are in our culture. Look at the view of our psychology. We suffer, most of the world, the commonest suffering we would say we have is low self-esteem, being seen as low, not being approved of, not being praised, being insulted, being harmed by others. We don't, I mean, we know we've got poverty and sickness, but I think the mental suffering of most humans is this one: being abused, not being seen as good, not being seen as low. So let's analyze this now. Let's analyze why we have that. It's because, this is shocking, it's because we have bucket loads of arrogance and pride. This is something we hear and we are shocked to hear it. We don't believe it. But look at this. Go right back to high school, the delusions, you learn about the delusions, and the key function of the delusions is that they're concepts and they exaggerate something. So attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of something. Aversion or anger exaggerates the ugliness of something. Low self-esteem exaggerates my badness, doesn't it? But pride exaggerates your qualities. Now, this is the point. We would not have low self-esteem if we didn't have pride. It's just a natural component. It's a natural quality of normal samsaric people. Even if you're a fairly humble person, there's still an aspect of it because it's a function of ego grasping. It's one of the outcroppings of ego grasping. So we have it massively in our culture. This is why we suffer so terribly when you're seen as low, or you're not praised, or you're insulted, or you're not seen for what you're doing. It's an extreme suffering. So this is why we all think we are loathsome. It's very connected to attachment as well. We think we are ugly, horrible. We over-exaggerate our ugliness. We over-exaggerate our bad qualities. And you look at this, when you've got a lot of low self-esteem and you look at the world, look at it, you've got to watch it carefully. You're going to see that you see other people who are better than you and more intelligent, richer, more happy, with partners and families and nicer houses or prettier noses or nicer feet. You look at it, then you are resentful. How dare they be better than me? We take it as a personal insult and then we turn it around and stab ourselves. I am nothing. Look at all those better people. That's because we've got pride. Now listen, if we didn't have pride, but we had humility instead, you'd be a content person. You would not compare yourself with other people. You'd be content in who you are. You would see other people and you would rejoice in their being more beautiful or more rich or more famous. You wouldn't take it as a personal insult. That's because we've got pride. So low self-esteem is the basis of pride. Low self-esteem exaggerates your bad qualities and you're offended by seeing other people who are better. It's a really fragile, unhappy state of mind. So because of that, we just can't hear these words. What do you mean, see myself as the lowest of all? I already do that. But this is not what's being said here. This is humility. A person with humility would be able happily to honor other people, see them, see their good qualities, want to help them. That's what's being said. So it's kind of blunt to say lowest and supreme, but it just means if you had humility, you'd be content in who you are and you'd be able to see other people and see their qualities and happily want to help them and put them first. It would be easy for a person, even just with ordinary humility, people who are kind and see their job is to help other people. But if you've got a lot of pride, which we all have, we have got low self-esteem. This is why we can't hear this word lowest of all. It's like he's rubbing our nose in it. So the lowest of all we have now is not the lowest of all they're talking here. It's training the mind to see good qualities in other people. That's what it's really doing. That's the point. So well, how do you apply this in daily life? Well, you can't say, it's too much for us to say, I will always consider myself the lowest of all and from the depths of my heart hold others, like a generality of others as supreme. Why not start with one person? It's a powerful practice. And how you do that is this. Let's say there's a person in your family or a person in your environment or a neighbor or someone at work who just annoys you slightly. just annoys you slightly. Make a conscious decision in your mind to point out something in them that's better than you. Now, I always joke about this, and it's true. I always joke about this. I mean, when I did Kung Fu, because when you do martial arts, you've got bare feet, you know, and I must be attached to my feet because I always thought I had the best feet for Kung Fu. They're short and fat and kind of very compact, you know, and I did a very good Kung Fu kick. I was very proud of my feet. I was proud. I was arrogant. I'd always be checking everybody's feet. So I remember Paulette, she was ahead of me in the belts. And she was really good at sparring, but she was very humble and like a giggly girl. And I was rather arrogant about it, you know. But she was far better at me in Kung Fu. But her feet were skinny and kind of, I thought they were ugly feet. Forgive me, but I'm talking. So then I decided, what's she better at than me? She's better at Kung Fu. She does better kicks than me. She's better at sparring. So then that's all I'm talking about. Now that takes courage, because if you've got a low self-esteem and you think you're completely a creep, you can't bear to see the good qualities of somebody else because you take it personally. So it's good practice. It's a profound practice, because if we look at ourselves more and more and more, we've all got pride. We all do not like to see other. We get threatened by seeing people who are richer and better or younger or more beautiful or more intelligent, or better feet, for God's sake. Automatically, we take it as an insult. So that's what we've got to catch that. And then think of one thing that person you don't like is better than you. Maybe their fingers are cuter. Maybe they've got nicer shaped ears. Something simple. You praise them. See them, literally see them as better than you. There's nothing wrong with that. We have competition. We have grade 1, grade 2. Somebody's better at math than me. That's a fact. It's not an insult, for God's sake. A person is better at music than me. That's not insulting, but we find that painful. Like we assume if you're better than me, I must be worse. So we put ourselves down. So this view is not low self-esteem, and it's not trying to be arrogant. It's simply a statement of fact that a person, you know, from your point of view, Paulette was better at Kung Fu than me. It's a fact. This is a powerful practice, people. So we've got 15 minutes. I'd like you to ask me some questions about this one. Understand it properly and ask me some questions, please. If there are any. If not, if you understand that, I'm happy. So I think I won't go any further in this verses. We'll continue these verses next week, okay? This will do. This is now. This is fine. So just sort of like have questions, or we just talk generally speaking again, this attitude of transforming problems, you know. We haven't got to the real hard work yet. It's coming soon. Okay, any other questions of any kind? Come on, darlings. Any other questions? Please, I'm very happy.
Venerable,
Yeah.
I was wondering, would you take a question about liberation and Nirvana? Because it's a...
Of course, you go ahead. Sure thing, go ahead.
Yes, it's a question that somebody had from a prior discussion. What's the difference between liberation and Nirvana? Would you please?
Of course, yes, exactly. I understand, yes. So if we look at the wisdom wing and the compassion wing as a good analogy, if you've graduated high school, that means you go to junior school, you work on karma, you abide by the laws of karma, you live in vows, you purify, you control your body and speech. Then you go to the next level and you get incredible renunciation of attachment and all the delusions. But then you would then get single point of concentration by practicing shamatha, and you would eventually realize emptiness. And then after life, after other several lifetimes, you would perfect all that. You'd remove all the delusions from your mind, and you would literally have achieved liberation from suffering and its causes, which is the meaning of nirvana, the cessation of suffering and its causes. And then when you die in that life, you won't come back. So you're a Hinayana Ahant. You've destroyed the enemy. Now, if you're on the, so liberation means nirvana. You're liberated from suffering and its causes, which is the completion of the first two scopes. They're the practices we share with the Theravadan practitioners. Then if you're on the compassion wing, you don't not come back. Even if you've realized and perfected it, you then go to the compassion wing and add bodhichitta to the mix, and you combine these two and you become a Buddha. And now you achieve the great nirvana, the enlightenment of a Buddha. That's the answer. I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Venerable. So it's
I believe you have 3 seconds. Wait, 3 seconds. Okay, go on. Questions? Yes. Who is
Christine.
there? Yes, Christine, darling.
Good evening. Actually, it's not a question. It's what you said before about humility and to be pride. It explained me what I lived when I went many times in Serajay. I am a sponsor of a young monk. Now he's in industry. But the first time when I went there, well, I brought present for him and things, and I thought that maybe the other one will be jealous.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Actually, they were so proud for him to have a godmother.
That's
and
it.
Then
That's
even
right.
if I didn't see him, someone came to me. Oh, Kunchok is over there. We.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes, exactly. No, you're absolutely right. That's right.
I do understand now exactly what.
Yes.
For me,
So you can see that. You can see with children, some child who's really suffering, really thinks they don't have enough, really thinks people don't love them. When other people get something, they're insulted by it. That's because of pride. We don't like to admit it, but that's what it is. And if we have low self-esteem, it's because we have pride. This is it's kind of hard to hear it, but it's very profound. It's a really good point. Exactly.
It's also something I could see also my low self-esteem about that, because
that's right. That's right, Chris.
Yeah, I understand that very nicely.
Very, very good. Good point. Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you.
What else is there? Anything else? Nothing. No questions. Nothing there, Lars.
We have Jeffifa with a question.
Who? Jeffifa. Hello, darling. Hello. Yes, talk to me, sweetheart.
Thank you, Venerable. Thank you. I'm a little confused about when I should purify and when I should think of somebody higher than me. So this woodchuck in my garden is eating all the vegetables, and I
yes.
So I could do the karmic analysis. I've perhaps harmed them in the past, so I purify my thoughts of anger and hatred. Now, is this also a case I can hold this woodchuck somehow higher than me?
I know, but I don't think, you see, I think that it's not that. I think in this case, that's not the tool. I think in this case, I mean, you could do it and offer all your vegetables to the woodchuck, that's fine, but just be practical. I mean, it's like, okay, if you were a bodhisattva, you would happily offer your veggies to the woodchuck, you know. But the other one is, it is a purification one, because basically the woodchuck's stealing your veggies, you know. They're stealing. So it's obviously stolen from them. So this is why if you did the practice of purifying, regretting having stolen from them, really regretted having stolen from it in the future because you don't want the future suffering, then having compassion, then don't be surprised that maybe it'll start to shift. The woodchuck might go somewhere else. I mean, it could, or find a way. I mean, this is where you got, I mean, I don't know how do gardeners manage. I do not know. It's hard. I mean, what do gardeners do about this? I don't know what are the techniques that gardeners use?
Well, I'm using these Buddhist practices now, and it is shifting a little as you know, that the ants are disappearing because I'm purify. I don't see ant colonies anymore, and then here comes this woodchuck. So it's like, oh, you know, another opportunity
to practice. Exactly. But I mean, on a practical level, because you know it's reasonable to want your veggies, it's okay to want your veggies, so keep your motivation pure. But I mean, what is the practical thing that a gardener would do to stop the woodchuck taking all your veggies? What do ordinary gardeners do? They just kill the woodchuck, do they? Or what?
When I was growing up, that's what my dad wanted. He took his gun out there, and he didn't actually he sure wanted to. You know, put up a fence. I don't know, different things. Yeah.
Does a woodchuck can eat all the vegetables? Are they kind of greedy? Are they, or what?
They appear to be. I think that's what I started to see when I really started watching this woodchuck. It's actually a good gardener because it doesn't clear everything out. It comes and eats some of the things and then goes somewhere else. And then it comes back a few days later and eats some of the things and then goes somewhere.
Is there such a thing as knowing what woodchucks really like and building a little garden just for the woodchuck? I mean, I don't know. I can't imagine being a gardener with all these little creatures around doing what they want. I just don't know how you can do it, frankly. But I got a feeling, I mean, again, the purification, but be precise about it. Because technically what the woodchuck's doing, I mean, he doesn't know they're your veggies, but that's really what's happening. Or like the white ants and come and eat your house. You've basically, you know, you've ruined their house in the past. So maybe you really regret stealing from this particular woodchuck and really have compassion. I'm out of interest. And then meanwhile, try to do what you can do to protect your veggies. I mean, this is why probably people have greenhouses, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't know. I can't imagine it.
Thank
I don't know.
you.
I think it's complicated to be a gardener. So many things to think about. Anyway, it's a good one. I think that one, regret precisely though, they're stealing from you.
Okay.
You know? Like if it was shitting in your garden, then because you've probably been mean and ugly to him, so that'd be different action. But regret precisely the action, you know, because you don't want the suffering, and then have compassion, and then purify, and then vow not to steal again. And then even to offer the creatures, try and think of offering to these creatures, maybe another garden somewhere else, I don't know, or even some. I mean, it's kind of ironic, it's just a story here. My auntie, Rabina Bliss, she married a Lithuanian in the 1950s. Australia let in all, I mean, this is, I always tell this story and I end up making it a long story because it's funny. But Australia basically was white supremacist. Australia had a white Australia policy. They called it that. It was called the White Australia Policy. After 1909, when they became a federation, they had all these rules that prevented, you know, non-English people. They were very bloody English, all the Poms, you know, the English. So they didn't want anybody but English to come, white English people. So they had this policy, they ran it because the country's enormous and they were starting to build the country, all the infrastructure, and they needed workers. So they tried to seduce the poor English people to come from a little tiny island to come, and the Welsh and the Scots, no doubt, Carol. And to come to Australia, gave them 1,000 acres, and the poor Poms, as we'd call them, would come and get this desert. They'd be very depressed and went back to the UK. So then eventually after the Second World War, this is really serious. They became desperate because they couldn't get enough white people. So they they decided they would use, this is really true, they would allow in the Eastern Europeans because they had blue eyes and blonde hair. So they let in all the Nazis. Even after the war, they even lowered their sights, I'm not joking, and they let in the Italians and the Greeks. And then by the 70s, they let in the Vietnamese, and now it's just a big fat soup like everywhere else. This is not joking, but Australia's got a good reputation. People love Australia. It's very hilarious. Anyway, my uncle was one of the Nazis they let in. He was a policeman in Germany. He was a complete Nazi. He didn't admit to it, of course. And he came into this family, my auntie Rabina Bliss. She was older. He just needed a wife to cook his meals for him and skin his chickens and all these things I'll tell you about. But anyway, we loved him. He was okay. Stasis, his name was. His name was Stasis Arkushauskas. So our auntie became Rabina Arkushauskas from Rabina Bliss, you know. So anyway, the point is, Stasi, we called him Stasi. He was a peasant, basically. So they moved to the country. And in Australia, there's between the two states, Victoria and New South Wales, there's this big river, the Murray River. So they got a property on the Murray River. So in the fish season, he would go fishing. He'd go eel fishing in the eel season. He'd go duck shooting in the duck season. He'd go quail shooting in the quail season. He loved it up there because there's so much wildlife. He would come home with these bags of fish and eels and chickens and quails. What I'm getting at is he had this big veggie garden, and he'd always say, "Oh, let the insects enjoy the veggies." So that was the point of the story. So it's kind of ironic, you know. He let the insects enjoy the veggies. I don't know about the birds, but he would shoot as well. He shot the rabbits. This is what he did, you know. So funny. Anyway, that was my uncle. That was a long story. So any more questions? It's time to go home soon. Any more questions? No more questions. That'll do, maybe. So, yeah, anyway. So all we're going to do with these techniques, hear the teaching, read it, aspire, and then do what we can with it. And that's why to think that all others are supreme is just, it's a grand statement. Do it with, it's easier to think it as a noble thought, but put your money where your mouth is and do it with one person, and usually do it with the person who annoys you. You know, it's easier to see the good qualities of your beautiful grandchild, but it's usually in reference to oneself is the point. Just merely praising a person is a good quality, but here it's very specific. It's seeing, like me with Paulette, what was she better? My feet might have been better than hers, but how was she better than me? She's better at Kung Fu. We find that quite painful, but these are conventional facts. You know, when you do exams, someone gets better than you praise them and delight for them. That's the thing. It's called rejoicing, like, you know. So yes, Mark, please ask the question.
So yeah, thanks, Rabina. So just wondering again about how we reconcile this verse 2 with the earlier teaching on equanimity, where everyone is the same, and now we're saying, no, I'm the lowest and others are superior.
I think the first verse is not equanimity, Mark. It's not saying equanimity at all. It's not saying
No.
that. It's just saying every damn sentient being. And it's really saying all the pedophiles, all the junkies, all the uglies, and all the beautiful ones. It's not saying they're equal. It's saying that I will simply hold them as most dear because they're so precious to me. It's not saying equanimity. Absolutely not. That's
No,
not the
sorry.
same.
Sorry,
That's
I didn't
okay.
mean that. I just meant that earlier teachings, other modules, we've talked about
Oh, okay,
equanimity.
because it's different, because they're all different techniques. They're different tools. They're precise
Yeah.
different tools. They don't contradict. They're just different tools you use at different times. So in one moment in the day, you know, let's say you're in the airline queue, the line, and you might get annoyed at the person who jumps in. Well, maybe you can practice there, the one of equanimity, or the one that they want happiness just like I do. That might be best for your mind. But another time, the practice might be, you know, I mean, this one is, you know, they're superior to me. So then because you think maybe the attitude there might be, maybe they have a more urgent need than me. So I'm happy they go. So it's up to you to choose. I mean, there's these hundreds of tools and you choose which one that your mind needs most at different times. And that's your call on it. You understand? They don't
I think so.
each other. They're just
I think
different
so.
tools you use at different times. So if you see the particular delusion, so in other words, for example, if you simply, it's like if your grandchild, okay, if in that line, so say you like girls and there's a cute girl who wants to go in ahead of you and you let her in because she's cute, but there's an ugly fat old lady and you don't like her, so you wouldn't let her in. So that's where equanimity would play out. One is an enemy and one is a friend. So out of your attachment, you let one person in, but out of your aversion, you don't let the other. So the precise practice there would be equanimity. But in this case, the one of seeing someone superior, if you're feeling very proud, how dare you push in front of me? That's pride. So then this practice would be the one, put them ahead of you. So it's seeing which delusion is arising in your mind, and that'll tell you the practice to use. Are you seeing my point?
I think so. So I've been looking at these as though they're statements of reality. So reality is that everyone's equanimity for everyone. Reality is that I'm lowest and others are superior. But actually, I think what you're saying is they're practices, they're tools.
Yeah, that's it, precisely. Yes,
That's all they are.
Absolutely, Mark. And it's a method for you to cut away your own rubbish ego.
Right.
So you've got to see which, in other words, you've got to know which, if you're not good at the backhand, you've got to fix your backhand. Then another time you've got to fix your forehand. There are different techniques and you've got to see which delusion is arising in you, and that's the one you apply.
Okay.
That's very precise.
Okay.
It's very personal. It's very personal, Mark. Do you understand? It's a
Yes,
really
I do.
good point. A really good
Thank
point,
you.
Mark. Thank you. I think we should finish on that point. That was a great point. So dedicate everybody for this 1.5 hours, all these points, try and get clear these teachings written in this 10th century or 8th century, whatever it is, maybe 10th century, I can't remember. Atisha, yeah, it must be a 10th century, 11th century. Very arcane, but don't just, you know, we've got to get the meaning behind it. It's quite technical, you know. It really is quite technical, the meaning. When we've got the technical meaning right, then we can taste the meaning. Then we can taste the meaning, people. We'll try to do that, okay? So this is really good. We'll go to next week. We'll go to the 3rd verse and we'll keep going. Jangchob, Semchog, Rinpoche, Make, Panam, Keguchi, Kepanyampa, Mepa, Yang, Gongne, Gondu, Pavashog. And that's it. That's it. That's it. Okay, darling people, thank you so much. As usual. So nice to see you all. Our year is nearly over. It's like a miracle, isn't it? I told you in August and September, I'm going to be in Australia and New Zealand. So I'm going to make an effort to get up at 3 in the morning to do these classes. So I think it's too complicated to have to change them. So I'll do my best. So someone's going to maybe have to ring me up on my number at 5 minutes before in case I'm staying asleep, you know. Maybe you can allocate someone that job, Lars.
Yes, we will. We've already discussed this. So
okay.
Thank you for reminding us. And
thank you.
Thank you for your huge efforts, Venerable. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
1 month before. I'm leaving in 1 month. So we'll finish this module before I go. Okay. Okay, darlings. Much love. Thank you so much.